As Mr. Sharma said, we have many nautical miles to go before we can rest. But we are on our way. India is targeting to increase our global ranking in shipbuilding, enhancing the nation's capacity to build, repair, and recycle vessels, thus supporting the broader Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. To give us a macro perspective, I now invite our special guest, Mr. Arjun Chowgule, Managing Director, Chowgule Group, on the dais for his address on shipbuilding as a strategic driver of India's maritime vision. A huge round of applause for Mr. Chowgule.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this program. I always am fearful of following somebody from the consultancy field because all the information is already given. But fortunately, after looking at Manish's presentation, while I agree with almost every point that he had mentioned, I'm very happy to note that my presentation will be a follow-on for his presentation. It will give a little bit more details in terms of how we see the competitiveness scenario of the industry. So what I wanted to focus on is on the competitive scenario, and as already has been discussed and everybody is well aware, when we talk about shipbuilding, really we're talking about three nations. We're talking about China, South Korea, and Japan. And beyond this, there's really nothing else to talk about. And just as one thing that I do want to add, and I keep talking about this within our own company, and especially when we make investment plans, that India's vision of being a top 5 shipbuilder by 2047, my view is that India will not be the 5th largest shipbuilder by 2047. It will, according to me, depends on how policy is implemented, not so much at the central level and through DG shipping, because I think a lot of the work has already been done, but also primarily at the state levels. India and how the private sector does react to that. India will either be the 8th or 9th largest shipbuilder in 2047 or the 3rd largest shipbuilder. But between that, I actually don't see the scope. I'm more bullish, if you personally ask me, on India being the 3rd largest shipbuilder in the world by 2047. But that's an aside. I don't want to jinx the government's plans, but let me just get straight to the presentation. This is, a lot of data is there on this presentation, and I'm happy to share these slides with anybody after. You can just approach me, give me your details, and I'll email you the presentation. But just very quickly, we know that the orders are dominated by 3 countries. China today is contributing close to 60% of the global order book in terms of tonnage. That's huge. Korea also is on its own, and 24% would be very significant, and Japan at around 13.5%. The rest is very, very insignificant. If you look at the shipping fleet and the order book, we are talking about a time when shipbuilding globally, there's a lot of investment being made in fleet renewals. But if you do look at what the numbers show, and you see the orange line over there, the fleet replacement rate today stands at around 12.5%, which is around a little lower than the long-term average. So we're not really at peak as yet in terms of fleet renewal, even though we do expect trade to increase, barring, of course, a lot of the issues that we are seeing and concerns we're seeing regarding geopolitics and trade relations, especially amongst the large countries. Indian shipbuilding, I don't want to get into it too much, but essentially we have a very strong defense shipbuilding ecosystem. We have a very strong ecosystem of public sector units and defense public sector units. The 6 large shipbuilders from the last cycle that propelled India to go from 0.04% to 1.25% of global shipbuilding have gone through, the 6 large shipyards have gone through the NCLT IBC process. Of these now, only 4 of them will become shipyards again. 2 of them have been repurposed for other facilities. Domestic demand is not so strong, but with the new policies that have come in, especially in terms of infrastructure status for shipping, it does look like domestic demand will start picking up. Export demand is strong, but of course we do have to get over the hurdle of clients' perceptions of India as a viable market in which to give a long-term shipbuilding contract. Cochin Shipyard and our company have, I would say, both of us are today in the top 10%, I mean top 5 in terms of the order book for the European dry cargo market. So in that one segment, we've seen India make a big leap. We were, as a country, approximately 4% of the order book around 10 years ago. Today, India is at 20% of the order book. We are the second largest region after China in that segment. So, and I have to say that a lot of the credit does go to some of the policies that have been there and the way that particularly DG Shipping has implemented it. And I don't just say this because Shri Shyam Jagannathan is sitting here. I would have said it even if his predecessor was sitting here. So this is very frankly I would say a very professional level of policy implementation that we are really seeing from the regulators. So that really helps the industry. Again, what is the vision? India has a vision of being a top 10 country by 2030 and top 5 by 2047. I've already given you what my views are. I don't want to go into it too much. But what I do want to talk about a little bit, just take a back seat and say why is shipbuilding important for us as a country? And Manish did talk about various reasons, but I would say let's look at it fundamentally. What does India aspire to be? And we all are behind the vision of a Viksit Bharat by 2047. And if you see countries that have gone from developing country status to developed country status since World War II, there are only 4 countries outside the city-states and outside the petro-states. And that's Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and China. And these countries, if you see, they're not friendly countries with one another. They have a lot of policy-level differences, cultural differences with one another, but they all grew on the backbone of the very, very similar policies. And the industries that grew these countries were remarkably similar. You had infrastructure, automobiles, electronics, and shipbuilding. Maybe Taiwan didn't have shipbuilding to the extent that the other 3 did, but Taiwan still had a strong maritime ecosystem that they developed. And the salient policies that drove this development across these 4 sectors was policy stability, domestic protection, export-driven industrialization. And I think this is a big focus that India does need to do. Because if we are able as a country to build good quality ships that the global market likes to take, then companies like even Shipping Corporation of India will not have the internal resistance that often companies do have with taking ships from India because of questions on what's going to happen in terms of quality, what's going to happen in terms of delivery, what is the second-hand resale value of the ships going to be in the market, you know, all of these types of questions. So we need to build up a ecosystem of export-driven industrialization. And finally, disciplined finance. Finance has to be directed at this sector, at all these 4 sectors, I would say. And unfortunately, this is the one area that still is lacking, despite a lot of the plans that have been coming out. But we're talking about finance primarily from the private sector, you know, from the banks and financing agencies. Today, a lot of that is going largely towards consumption, and we need it to go towards production. And that's one area that we do need to talk. Again, this is not so much about just our industry, and but this is really a larger national issue that needs to be dealt with. And why is, I would just like to show you this one slide. China categorizes the shipyards in 4 different tiers. You have the best who are tier 1, and then the not so good that are tier 4. But if you see the tier 4 shipyard itself, most of the production is exported. That's the level of integration that the Chinese shipbuilding ecosystem has with the global markets. And if you talk about state support, now while India has put out a program of, I would say, I want to compare in dollar terms, around $10 billion over the next 10 years towards the maritime industry, and shipbuilding is getting approximately $3 billion of that. If you look at China, and ours is $3 billion over 10 years. China, the shipbuilding industry gets $11 billion on average every year, and they've been getting it for the last 18 years. So that's $180 billion or $200 billion that China has got already, and this plan is not stopping, they're still continuing it. I recently had made a visit to a number of shipyards and ancillary players in China, and I saw the type of scale that they're operating at. But what I would say, in none of the shipyards did I feel that they're operating at full capacity. Everybody's operating at very comfortable levels of capacity, which was a very interesting thing to see, that they do have that flexibility in terms of managing the production. So this is just more data on this. There are, of course, a lot of the, as Manish had said, that a lot of the data is hidden. You know, we don't really know how much China is doing. So when we did, I looked at two studies, one from the Center of Policy Research in the US and the other one, which was academic-based model that we had done. We saw that the numbers align between $11 to $13 billion per year annually. But worst case scenario, we're not seeing anything below $9 billion. That's the absolute lowest case scenario. No year has it really gone below $9 billion. A lot of this has really gone towards capacity development in China. So yes, we do know that shipbuilding is a very strategic sector, and therefore, if you have a strategic sector, you have to put the necessarily public investment behind it. And public investment, when it means from the government, it means from the states, but it also means do it in such a way that you actually do promote private sector investment to also follow on with that. You know, we don't want to have a situation where we're just putting government money and taxpayer money behind this industry. That has to be backed up by, but you do it in such a way that you incentivize private sector to come in, because private sector realizes that there is policy stability, this is a strategic outlook for the country, we need to be behind this, and there is good returns to be had over here. Now, I'm going to now start comparing the three countries with India in terms of actually how are they able to be competitive. But what I want to start off with is to say that, just to keep in the back of your mind, that shipbuilders typically operate with margins of between 5 to 8%. So we're not an industry which has very, very high levels of margins and profitability. A lot of the profitability and margins are driven by productivity, which is then very individually dependent on the company. But typically we operate between 5 to 8%. In that context, let's compare a handy-sized vessel, which is a very typical type of vessel, and it's a vessel that it's a bulk carrier that India would aspire to be building in large numbers going forward. And a typical handy-sized vessel of around 40,000 deadweight tons costs today in the market a new build of around $33.5 million. Now, there are multiple factors that impact the cost of shipbuilding. The first one is steel. And if you look at steel, this is really where you see a large amount of incentivization and subsidies coming in across all the countries, not just China. China does it the most effectively and the most aggressively. But if you look at today, India's steel purchase is at market rates, at global market rates at around $820 per ton. And China is somewhere down at $470 a ton. And in between you have Japan and Korea. So you see the difference in terms of percentages on the third last column, but on the entire ship, India then has a cost disadvantage of 7% compared to China. The equipment ecosystem is actually the single largest contributor towards competitiveness. And if you look at the equipment ecosystem, what we did is looked at getting a multiplier put in. And let's say China's equipment ecosystem is very, very well integrated. They're all, if you need a part, it's available in 24 hours. If something is missing on the engine or in the propeller shaft, and you need to order it from the factory, it comes in within 12 hours. A part comes in within 12 hours. In India, if you have to do that, you have to wait at least 2 weeks, if you're lucky, for it to be air cargo to you. So if you look at that, therefore, China has an equipment multiplier of 1%. India is 1.18. Okay, and then Korea and Japan are somewhere in the middle because they still have very good equipment ecosystems, but not as well developed as China has done through a very, very effective program. The total impact on the vessel for India means that 1.18 multiplier gives it a price impact of 9% more than China. So the development of the equipment and ancillary ecosystem is extremely important. Interest rates and the cost on shipbuilding. We have, typically you operate on around 50% stage payments, and there's therefore a working capital of around $16.75 million that you would do. And if you look at the incentivization packages that are there for interest rates, and India now has come in line with that, so this number would reduce because there is a interest rate incentivization package that you can go to the bank with. But this increases the price by around 2 to 2.5% compared to China. But I'll compare all of these factors together. A single very important thing is the bank guarantees. And my colleague from the industry, Sahiraj, has spoken about this in the media quite a bit. But the collateral coverage in India we still do balance sheet financing. In the other countries, they do strategic financing. And that's the big difference over here. And unless we're able to get out that mindset, we're not going to be able to develop these strategic industries as effectively as we can. And with the balance sheet financing, a shipbuilder in India would have to put in up to around 35% of collateral to get, for every $1 of bank guarantee coverage that they have to put in, they have to give 35 cents of asset collateral. So essentially, a lot of the assets that they're building is actually going to work for the bank over there. This leads to a price increase of around 1.9%. But if you compare everything together, you look at steel, equipment, interest, bank guarantees, and labor, and I'm looking at labor, looking at the cost of labor plus the productivity, all combined. What we are seeing is that the total impact for a $33.5 million ship for India is around 24% more expensive than from China. This is just on costing. And that really is where the shipbuilding financial assistance policy that the government has very generously provided to the industry does come in to bridge the gap to some degree. But the shipbuilding financial assistance is today at around 15%. And we're still seeing a number of a conventional vessel of around 24%. So this is just to give some context to this. And since I have Captain Tyagi in the room, I should also talk about the cost of ship ownership because of the interest rates. And I think this is going to be something that we need to talk about a little bit more going forward, and we'll have to have a lot more discussions about going forward, because what we're seeing in geopolitics that is happening and trade being used as a weapon by some countries, and the retaliation for that is going to be that how do we de-dollarize? How do we start trading in our own currencies? So if India is going to start trading in Indian rupees instead of US dollars, then naturally the ship owner is going to say, I want my earnings to be my payments to be in Indian rupees rather than US dollars, because then I have a natural hedge. But if my interest payments are in US dollars and my earnings are in Indian rupees, I don't have a natural hedge to that. But because of our interest rates today, just if you're looking at dollar terms, we do have a large disadvantage in terms of ship ownership. So this is obviously something that we need to address through now the government has come up with the infrastructure status for ships, large ships in the harmonized list, which, while good, I think we do have some issues with going forward, but I'll come to that a little later. So the fundamental requirements that we need to achieve the Maritime Amritkal Vision 2047, the revamp of Shipbuilding Financial Assistance Program 2.0, that's already done. The capital incentives to establish new shipyards with single window clearance, that is also done. Infrastructure status for shipbuilding is in progress. Infrastructure status for ships, while done, it has been categorized of minimum 1,500 gross tonnage, which I think is a huge mistake. And the industry has consistently been asking for categorization based on industry standards and not by arbitrary standards that come in from people who don't understand the industry. And I think this is an issue because if you look at just one sector, which is the port sector, India has a very ambitious program of replacing all the tugs operating in the major ports with green hybrid tugs. These vessels cost around 100 crores, but they don't have infrastructure status. So what you're doing is you're getting a 20,000 crore program that you want to achieve over the next 10 years, but you're not allowing it to get the right type of financing just because you've not categorized that vessel as infrastructure. So it's a big issue, and unless we were to change it, I feel that India will struggle to get that policy properly implemented in a way that is competitive and sustainable for the entire industry to flourish. And finally, the focus finance. This is something that we need to do not just at at a shipbuilding level or a maritime level. This is something that we need to do at a larger level across the entire economy. So I have already covered the issue of the categorization of ships so I will not get into that. But one of the reasons why I would say that use industry standards is because all these ships are being used to transport cargo in some way or the other. Even if you're talking about a tug is being used to eventually maneuver a larger ship carrying cargo. Now, when the whole ecosystem gets financed very, very competitively, we know that trading through the seas and the rivers is the cheapest cost of financing. This really enables us to really move the needle when it comes to reducing logistics costs in the economy. From today, we are at around between 11 to 12%, and our target is to get it to around 6% of GDP. It's not going to be possible unless we actually get the infrastructure status for the entire industry. I'm not saying you do get it for small boats and those type of vessels, but get it for anything that is enabling cargo to be moved. And finally, I'd just like to end on this one slide, and this is something that everybody needs to understand, is that this is one of the few sectors in the economy that is capital intensive on both the building side, so that's for a shipbuilder, it requires a lot of capital to build a shipyard and also to finance the building of ships, and also on the buying side. All ship owners have very, very high gearing levels because the life of the asset is very long. And so it doesn't make sense for them to put 100% equity into it. You do take a substantial amount of loans for that. And because of that, you have to treat this sector very, very strategically and very, very differently. It has to be a very conservative approach. It has to be a sustainable approach. And in our company, for example, it was a conversation I was having yesterday, and I was telling our people that, we've been fortunate and very, very grateful for the support that we've received from the regulator, the ministry, and all our clients and our suppliers, that we've been able to grow quite rapidly over the last 5 years, and we are going over the next phase of our development. But I said it's like having a very, very big breakfast and suddenly going for another heavy lunch. You have a problem with indigestion. So this is an area that you do need to work conservatively, plan properly. You have to have ambition, but you cannot be over-ambitious. But as an entire ecosystem and as a country, if we can have the right type of ambition, like I said, we will be the third largest shipbuilder by 2047 for sure. If you're not, we will be the 8th largest. Thank you.
Request you, Mr. Chowgule, to stay back on the stage. Request Mr. Anil Radhakrishnan, Director, Bombay Chamber, and CEO, GMR Enterprises, to present you with a token of our appreciation. A huge round of applause for Mr. Chowgule for that very comprehensive presentation.